Could you say your name, please?
Yeah, my name is Francisco Gonzalez.
And what do you do for work?
I am a cloud solution architect. Essentially, I help new customers or existing customers move to cloud.
And have you done any Verilog or ASIC or digital design stuff before?
Nope. This was the first time I ever touched any RTL type of software, and obviously first time writing Verilog.
Okay, cool. So really zero then, zero to ASIC.
Exactly.
So what made you want to do the course?
I think there's a series of factors. I'm kind of like a sci-fi guy, and I always kind of like tend to see the future and see what's happening, and like let's say what's going to be there in like 50 plus years from now. And I think there was a quote from, I'm a fan of 2001 Space Odyssey, and the author, I think he mentioned something like, any sufficiently advanced technology is essentially indistinguishable from magic. No pun intended. So yeah, I mean, I wanted to understand how computers work essentially, because I'm like up here in the cloud, not literally, but with software at a super high level, essentially, with super high level type of languages and services and databases and whatnot. But I really wanted to know what's under the hood. And then there was someone who tweeted, I don't know if it was a company or someone tweeted something around how computers think using etchings in sand and measure time using crystals. And I was like, oh, that's awesome. I want to learn how that works. Like, that's essentially what I wanted to do the course. And then the last bit was the whole ecosystem. I never realized that the open source hardware silicon did not exist until very recently, or until now it kind of like started to itself put together. And there's like a lot of things happening really quick in the last few years. And I guess that's why I saw you advertising, that you're gonna do this zero to ASIC. I'm like, I'm zero. Okay, I have no idea how to do this, but it seems to be a right chance to get my hands on, sort of like the skills or the training material that will ultimately help me understand what basically constitutes magic in the computer world.
Nice explanation. What part of the course did you enjoy the most?
I think, like, again, I never used any of these tools. So the minute I saw GTK Wave, I think that was like, ooh, this is exactly what's happening. Like, you can see exactly when, zeros becomes one, and then, how when you put together, that's, 8 bits, and that's like an address, and then, that the whole, I think when you look at GTK Wave after you've done something, I thought that was pretty cool. And maybe the other thing was seeing OpenLane do its thing and like turn that into, or harden your design and see how, the floor planning works. And then how after a few seconds or minutes, then it starts to put all the different placeholders. And then, after some time, you start to see how it's kind of like doing its thing to connect things to each other. And you just basically wrote a few lines, and all this work went, by the tool, or it was done by the tool. So that was pretty cool. Yeah.
Great. For you, what was the most valuable part of the course?
I think it's like I said, I don't do this. Like, I don't do any hardware kind of thing for a living. I mean, at the most, I would write some C code for microcontrollers and things like that ultimately connect to the cloud. So I value kind of like getting data sort of curated. Like you can Google you can Google pretty much anything, and you can watch hundreds of hours of videos and get some level of understanding. But I think what I think it's really valuable is just having that kind of like I think it was like 5 courses, and then each of them have like subsections, and knowing that if you go from here to there till the end, you'll complete something. I think that's extremely valuable, because otherwise I had to basically grab little bits from different places, and then I guess it also makes sense to have like the sense of community helps a lot, because I know that this is something relatively new in the industry, and perhaps in a few years from now, then whoever started to play around with this stuff then ultimately will be kind of friends with each other in like 5-10 years. So that sense of community, I think it has value as well.
Cool. Would you recommend this course to other people?
Yeah, absolutely. Even if you've never done hardware design, or if you've never done, even if you're not going to do, I think it's something that we owe to computers to do. Like we all have a phone in our hands. We all have like a couple of gigahertz worth of compute power in our hands, but I don't think many people know exactly how that works. So I think everyone should I mean, maybe not everyone, but I think it's something that, it's really interesting to know like how exactly things work, and we are surrounded by computers, so I think that's important as well.
Yeah. Okay. How far did you get along with coming up with an application for MPW2?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I think the most difficult thing I was presented to during the course is like choosing what to do, because I wasn't like I said, I don't do this, so I don't have an idea or like something specific I wanted to try out. It was more like, let me find something that's meaningful enough so that I can build on top of that in the future. And not because it has to be open source, but why waste the opportunity on something trivial where I have the chance to do something important for me and perhaps with the community. So I actually started with the 6502. So there's a couple of cores out there that people have written and tested them on FPGAs. And I took that. I was like, yeah, I'm going to build the 6502. And it was super exciting when you see the device boot. Well, not exactly boot, but initialize itself and, kind of like tell you or output the reset vector. And then you kind of have to write the memory on the other side and, kind of respond to that. So that was super exciting. I was like, okay, I'm going to do this. I'm going to end up with like a 6502, a hardened 6502 with the, Skywater 130 nanometer process. Like that was in my mind. But then I realized it's like, I don't think it has a lot of value for me, but it doesn't have a lot of value for anyone really. I mean, for the community, maybe you just proven some core, right? And that's it. That's all you got. So I thought, stop and maybe wait until the next shuttle and do something more meaningful. So to answer your question, I got till the end, but then I decided, hey, I think I feel comfortable enough to go back to square one, but with a better idea. And now I have a couple of ideas that I'm going to try out, which I couldn't really have those ideas unless I went through this process. So there was no way I could have come up with a better idea until I went through this process.
So you're planning maybe to get something ready for MPW3?
Yes. Yeah.
Great news.
Fun. Yeah.
Okay. Cool. What would you improve about the course?
I like the. So there was maybe I'm not used to the tool, so for me it was a bit different. But I noticed that everything's make related, and it kind of has to be. Like everything are recipes that kind of depend on each other. But perhaps if you have never used make, then I have a little bit, because in the microcontroller world it's either make or CMake or Ninja or something like that. But I wasn't as acquainted with make in general, like not as advanced. So that was something that it took me a little bit of time. So maybe, kind of getting more kind of basics on how make works, and just some kind of like 101, what is make? That would be interesting for someone who has never touched it. And maybe Mac. A lot of people use Macs, and figuring out how to get the tools in Mac wasn't
middle click.
Yeah, it wasn't difficult, but it's not trivial if you're not used to Docker and how Mac works in general, especially with dealing with not standard, or I wouldn't call it standard, but let's say software you have to manually kind of get into your system. And there's a lot of people using Macs, so maybe that would be interesting. Although it's totally possible. Like I never spin up the virtual machine. I just used my Mac, and I was able to figure it out. So it's not, you don't need I mean, it works fine with Mac, basically. Yeah.
Great. Okay. Anything else you'd like to add?
No, I think that's it. I think it was a great experience. I think my family, you know, she says that, or my wife, I guess, she always tells me every time you do something like this, you change a little bit. And she definitely noticed that I changed after this course. Like it just, you know, you're a different person after. I know it sounds crazy, but if you've never done it and you understand it, then now it's like, oh, now I, you know, like this FPGAs around me. And then I recently learned about the whole SymbiFlow thing. That's interesting. So now I'm like more of on the hardware kind of bandwagon, if that makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm really curious now. You say it changed you. Like, in what way did it change you?
Well, you know, I'm always, I guess part of my role is to, in general, to be innovative, right? So, you know, there's only so much you can do with, you know, servers and Raspberry Pis and ESP32s, right? And you know, it seems to be a very competitive market, and it seems like everyone's getting to a point where there's nothing else that can be done. But now it's like I discovered this totally new way of approaching problems, right? Like there's a totally new way to, you know, if you want to do machine learning, you know, if you get to the basics of how a neural network works, then, you know, and that's ultimately C code. Could you synthesize that into Verilog? And if you can do that, then you have an accelerator. And probably not a lot of people are trying to resolve that problem. So it changed me because now I'm like, ooh, I just realized there's this whole new world that I had no clue that it existed that I could use to solve problems that I don't even know what they are yet. Yeah.
Cool. Super cool.
I don't know.
Yeah, I'm really happy to hear that. That's great. That's a really good outcome.
Yeah.
Well, thanks very much for your time, and I'm really glad that you came on the course.
Awesome. Thanks for your time as well.